So good morning, Massimo,
Good
and
morning, Tino, and hello, everyone.
yeah, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are located. Let
Of
us give them
course,
a few more minutes to
yes.
log into the system and to join the webinar for today.
Well, let's wait a few moments to allow all participants to connect.
Mhm.
In the
Okay.
meantime, I would like to give a brief explanation of how our meeting will take place.
Mhm.
Our webinar will be mainly divided into two parts. A first part dedicated to a short presentation where Tino will explain the difference between proven use and prior use. It's correct, Tino?
Correct. That's the topic
Okay.
for today.
During the presentation, it will be possible for you to send questions through the Zoom chat. Instead, in the second part, we will continue to answer your questions. In the meantime, we will show through slide what are the most common questions we are asked about the topic.
Mhm. Okay.
Good. At this point, I think we are ready to start with our webinar. If you have not already done, I kindly ask you to disable your microphone.
Mhm.
Well, Tino, I think we can start now. Let me give some information on today's speaker. With me today, Tino. Tino is Director of Functional Safety Services at TÜV Rheinland. He is a senior functional safety expert and accredited trainer for the CIS program of TÜV Rheinland and a senior member of ISA. He has over 30 years of experience in the world of process industry, and today he is one of the leading authorities in the field of functional safety. He has published many papers and magazine articles and is frequently sought after for seminar and presentation based on his international recognized passion and mastery of the subject matter. And I, Massimo Pagani, product manager and technical support specialist at GM International. I've been employed at GMI for about 13 years, and my role is to receive and process customer technical requests and assist them in the correct choice of products to be used in their application. Well, some information about the company. GM International is an Italian company born from the experience of Elcon Instrument, and for over 25 years has been design, engineering, and manufacturing a complete range of SIL certified intelligent safe devices. Our products are used in automation packages such as DCS, ESD, spiral gas, marine, and so on, in various industrial sectors such as oil and gas, petrochemical, pharmaceutical, food and beverage, and railway. All our products are tested one by one and must conform to the strictest worldwide specification. Next slide. The following slide show how GM International is located around the world with over 200 people who make up our staff, distributed in all continents. We have product stock distributed in our main branches in Dubai, Singapore, Houston, and so on. Next. GM International has always been perceptive to market demands. For this reason, its products are innovative in order to get maximum customer satisfaction. The strong point on which GM International bases its activity is the complete pre- and post-sales assistance in order to lead its customer to find the best solution for their application and to assist them in the correct use of the products. In addition, all our products are entirely designed and produced in our headquarters in Italy and are tested in highly automated process. Next. The goal of our company is to supply and guarantee innovative and high-quality products. All our products are tested one by one and must conform to the strictest worldwide specification. Our products are tested and certified by over 15 independent UV agencies and laboratories. They have certifications available for different market applications: Europe, America, Korea, China, India, and so on. And according to the new ESC 61508, the seal certification of the product is no longer valid. It's not supported by the systematic capability design certification. For this reason, all our products are designed to adhere to the functional safety management, seal-free systematic capability certification. Additionally, over 10% of GMI employees are engaged in research and development of new technologies. Many of our resources are reinvested in the research and development department. You can see the range of products in our portfolio. We can see ES barrier, safety relay, galvanic isolator, multiplexer for temperature or digital sensor, seal-free power supply system, termination board dedicated to the most popular PRC-DCS system, ARM multiplexer, and so on. Furthermore, our company promotes advanced courses of functional safety and safety in a X environment conducted by expert trained as Tino. You can find all the information about it on our website. The last slide lists some of our main collaborators and customers distributed among system vendor, EPC, and end user. Well, now I'm leaving Tino time for his presentation on today's topic. Please, Tino.
Thank you, Massimo, for the introduction, and thank you, GMI, for giving us another opportunity to share some of our know-how. For those who joined us in the last couple of minutes, because I see still people coming into the webinar, as Massimo was saying, if you have a question, you can fill it into the question and answer in the Q&A box. This session is recorded like all our previous sessions. The recorded session will be available on the YouTube channel from GMI and will also be sent to you in a PDF version from GMI themselves. Plus, additionally, there is a certificate of attendance. I believe if you attend like 75% of the time of the webinar, that GMI will honor you with a proof of evidence that you followed this webinar. With this all being said, it's time for starting the topic on something which has been often confused and mixed together. The word proven in use and also the word prior use are two different definitions from two different standards. They both mean something identical, but of course, as usual, they both have some different definition and of course also implication to what you may have been using before. I go back in time, which is easy for me as I've been around the block for a few years. In other words, I've been with the 61508 already involved when it was still a draft. Initially, when it came out in 1997, 98, I have been together with some other colleagues, we were being tasked to introduce the 61508 in Europe. There was a specific project funded by the European Commission. So we were tasked to go into different countries in Europe to introduce what 61508 was all about. And the 61508 standard first edition had no proven in use consideration. What the edition 1 had was only a theoretical approach, which is still today known as the Road 1H, which is still the same in the edition 2 of the standard 61508. And I'm looking here at the first bullet and I'm pointing I'm hovering here with my cursor around the year 2010. So the second edition of the 61508 has been released in 2010 in April. And the third edition has not been released yet, but is coming. Most likely somewhere in 2026, 2027, somewhere in that range, we potentially will have the third edition out. And there are, of course, as in every edition, there are always some changes that you may have to be aware of. The second bullet is showing you the IEC 61511, which the first edition was out in 2003, and the second edition came out in 2016/2017. I'm mentioning 2016, 2017 because initially it came out 2016, but there was a wrong draft being released, so there was an amendment out 2017. And if there is someone listening in from US, which it should be either very late or you had a very late night or you are still awake, whatever it is. So for those who are on the overside of the pond in US, the ISA 84 adopted the 61511 in the year 2018. So in the US, they're now speaking about the ISA 61511 2018. Back here in Europe, we mainly speak about the IEC 61511 2017. Now, from the very first moment, the prior use term was in the first edition of the 61511. It was called prior use, but it was described in the description as proven in use. And that's maybe where the confusion came, because many people thought it was the same, while in 2003, edition 1 of the 61511, it was defined as prior use. But as I said, description in the definition, which is in chapter 3 of part 1 of the 61511, this was saying proven in use. The second edition of the 61508 that was being revised in 2010 in April, and as you may know or not know, the IEC 61508 is specific for the manufacturers, like Massimo was just explaining. A vendor like GMI, when they want to develop a new product from scratch, for sure they will go to the reference points of the part 2 and part 3 of the 61508, which is the hardware section, software section, in other words, the developers. And as Massimo was just mentioning, 10% of all the people are working in development in GMI. So when those engineers are developing a new product, they follow the 61508 part 2 and part 3. And they will, of course, from scratch, they will use the Road 1H compliance. Now, if a vendor is collecting some failure data, receiving back from installed base, they can call something called proven in use. And proven in use was introduced in the year 2010, meaning or was defined as Road 2H. So here in the third bullet, you see here the definition of Road 2H. This was called proven in use. And I have made some slides to tell you now the difference between the 61511 prior use and the edition 2 of the 61508, which is called proven in use. The second edition, which is 2016-17 of the 61511, remains the same definition as Road 2H, but they call this prior use. So when you are building your system, and I have made a slide with some table, with some summary, when you're now building a loop and you want to comply to the 61511 edition 2, the preference is to first use prior use, which is called the Road 2H. If you don't have your own failure data from your own installation, the alternative is you can ask your vendors for, say, subsystem or product documentation. And that documentation is either based on Road 2H, which is called proven in use from the 61508, or it is based on the theoretical FMEA estimate of failure behavior of that product, which is then called the Road 1H. But again, I made a summary that you can visually see this into a table. Going into a little bit more details on definitions. So as I mentioned, proven in use in the initial edition 1, 1998, did not exist in the 61508. They only introduced it in the edition 2, 2010, which is a definition, and I'm referring here to part 4, which is all the definitions from the 61508. And if you read the definition itself from proven in use, that means you will have to prove something. It's done with a demonstration based on analysis of operational experience for a specific configuration of an element, that the likelihood of danger systematic faults is low enough so that every safety function that used the element achieved its required safety integrity level. Well, you can keep on reading that. That's quite subjective, but at least they are trying to say you need to prove, you need to demonstrate that the safety function of your safety device or component or subsystem will achieve safety even in case of some dangerous systematic faults. Now, the question is, of course, you can ask yourself the question, what is now a systematic fault versus a dangerous random hardware fault on my subsystem? So there are all kinds of definitions. The more you start to go into details, the more the confusion will raise among the engineers. The definition of the 6.15.11, which is the prior use of the edition 1 2003, the reference was given as proven use, as already mentioned, and they said when a documented assessment has shown that there is appropriate evidence based on the previous use of the same component, that component is suitable for use in a SIS or into a safety instrumented system. So again, it's quite a wide giving definition, which is not so precisely detailed for most of the engineers as you would like. So there is still room for interpretation and room for subjectivity. Edition 2, which was the 6.15.11 2016/2017. If you go to the same reference, which is here the reference giving from chapter 3, which is in part 1. And they said prior use is a documented assessment by a user. So you can read this an end user because it needs to be the user of that device, that device is suitable for use in a SIS and can meet the required functional safety and safety integrity requirements. That means the necessary SIL requirements based on previous operating experience in similar operating environments. So they are trying to be a little bit more precise, but still, as my British colleague would say, you can drive a bus through such type of definitions, which basically engineers will do. They will make their own interpretation of that. So we are certainly not out of the woods yet. There are lots of definitions given to us, but no one really can precisely tell you, based on their own interpretation, what exactly needs to be proven as proven in use or prior use. When I go into the 6.15.08 edition 2 for the manufacturers, the hardware safety integrity are strictly constrained, which is actually known as how many do you need in order to achieve a certain safety. We will abbreviate that with a HFT or a hardware fault tolerance. There are two potential solutions by 6.15.08 edition 2. The first solution is the old 1997, which is the edition 2 of the standard, and they go back to the edition 1, which is a 1997 Road 1H, based on hardware fault tolerance and safe failure fractions. The concept is based on safe failure fraction, and we will see later a table. The higher the safe failure fraction, which is for type A and type B, which is for a table 2 and table 3 of the 6.15.08 standard, they will give you a table, and you will see the higher the safe failure fraction, the lower the HFT for the higher SIL. That is something that I will show you. And that is still based as we used to have it in the edition 1 of the standard 6.15.08. Road 2H, based on a component reliability data from feedback from end users, increased confidence levels and hardware fault tolerance for specified safety integrity levels. And that's an interesting to make the following comment. How many vendors receive failure data from components, devices, or subsystems which are no longer in warranty? In other words, if a device is no longer in warranty and it fails, most likely the end user will, of course, have to repair it with a identical equivalent, maybe from the same brand, the same vendor, or maybe potentially from another vendor. In other words, those failing devices are often not being sent back for analysis to the vendors because that costs money. And maybe the money for courier and for analysis is maybe more than shipping you a new device. So in other words, if you look in the quality of data, the vendors do not receive data back for a simple reason that the end users have no or don't have sufficient culture, don't have sufficient, let's say, analysis capabilities, know-how capabilities, competent capabilities, availability of staff capabilities, whatever is the reason or excuse, the end users do not collect the data which they should. And the whole edition 2 of the IEC 6.15.11 is pushing the end users to collect quality failure data, because the whole standard is focusing on the availability of your system, and it's all about the data uncertainties. How can you prove with confidence factor the data certainties or uncertainties of your field devices, of your application, with your environment, with your proof test experience, confidence factors, and consistency factors, etc. So there are many reasons that we can say what potentially is the challenge, why the vendors do not receive back data from the end users, because the data doesn't exist in the first place. Going into the 6.15.11 edition 2, which is now for end users. So we are no longer in the camp here of the manufacturer. We are now here in the camp of the end users. And this question is here, hardware safety integrity architectural constraint. Again, it's the same question. How many will you need to achieve a certain SIL level? So edition 2 of the 6.15.11 made a clear decision. The preference is not to use the safe failure fraction. Basically, the committee decided for edition 2, they don't trust safe failure fraction from manufacturers any longer, period. Someone who knows the mathematics, someone who knows the formula of safe failure fraction will understand that if you make the ratio of safe failures high, or the failures in time, or the fits, the quantity of failures in time, you make them very high, and you keep your estimate of failures in time of daily failures very low, your safe failure fraction ratio will be sky high. And that's what edition 2 said. Let's ask the end users to collect their own data, as already mentioned, with their own proof test records, with their own proof test coverage, with their own proof test interval and experience in their own similar environment and applications, etc. So that all make logically sense. And that sounds wonderful, but the question is, in reality, is how many end users can prove that they have good data. So they say here, in addition to, we will no longer focus on the safe failure fraction because we know there is a kind of a, let's say, subjectivity on the ratio, let's say, quality that is being estimated on that device. So therefore, they prefer to use failure data from their own application. And the table 6, which we are referring to here, will only look into the SIL level. And the higher the SIL, the higher the HFT. To give you a summary already, like for the SIL 1, any mode of operation, that means low demand mode, high demand mode, continuous mode, you are allowed to build a HFT equal to 0. That means you can build and achieve a SIL 1 with a single 1 out of 1 subsystem or device. When you go into SIL 2, low demand mode, which is low demand means your safety function will not be triggered or not be activated more than once per year. That's called a low demand. You're still allowed to use an HFT of 0. However, if you go into the high demand mode, that means your safety function is triggered more than once per year. For that one, the standard requires an HFT equal to 1. That means you need to have a architecture of a 1 out of 2 as a minimum, or potentially as a 2 out of 3 if you would look into the sensor options. So summary, on the 6.15.11 today, there are 3 options available to comply to the standard. I call this myself, I put here an asterisk, that is my own definition, because there is no method 1, 2, 3 defined in the standard. That's my, let's say, explanation that I'm using in my training courses, which I'm mainly doing for TOV in Ireland for the Function Safety Engineer SIS program. Now, method 1 is if your vendor can prove to you, based on the Road 1H definitions, if they can prove safe failure fraction and hardware fault tolerance based on type A, type B, then you can use that method number 1, which I will show you on a summary slide later on. Method number 2 is when the vendor of your subsystem can again demonstrate, but this is based on the Road to H, so this is the famous proven in use. And method number 3 is when you have quality feedback, failure data from your own data, your own experience, etc. Well, then you can still stay on Road to H. And both Road to H from this method 2 or method 3 can use the simplified table, which is called table 6 in the IEC 6.15.11. I got a poll question. I'm not sure, Massimo, if you can start the poll for me.
Yes, Tino, we have the first poll of the day for the participant of our webinar. We
Okay.
ask anyone who feel like it to try to answer the following question.
Okay, all right. I will ask the question for them. So there is a poll, but you need to launch the poll, I think. Let me see if I can launch it over here. Poll and quizzes. Architectural constraints. So let me just launch this one. Okay, so now everyone
Yes,
should.
perfect. Okay, let's take a few moments to try to answer.
Okay, so the architectural constraint, as per the 6.15.11, as we just explained, can either use this method 1 or 2 or method 3, but only one method per safety invariant function is acceptable. Answer B can use method 2 and method 3, both based on row to H mixed per SIF. Answer C can use only row to 1H when claiming prior use for the 6.15.11. And the last answer D can mix per SIF, per safety invariant function, all the methods 1, 2, 3, all as applicable as a mixed together. That is the question which we'll ask you. So we still, in the meantime, there was a question coming in that I also will read
Yes,
from a
yes.
participant. Prior use doesn't guarantee proven to use. Is this interpretation correct? Please advise. I'm not really sure I understand the question. However, prior use is a definition that is coming out of the IEC 6.15.11, whereas the definition as itself, proven, it's called proven in use, not proven to use, is coming from the 6.15.08. And if I try to understand the real question, doesn't guarantee proven to use. Well, prior use is a defined definition from the 6.15.11 where the end user will need to prove evidence why they claim prior use. You cannot just say we use prior use in our factory because we like it, we like the system, and it never fails for us. That's no evidence. We need to see evidence such as failure data, confidence factors. But I think that question will be most likely be answered later on in the slides, which we already have prepared. In the meantime, let me end the poll and let me just share the results. Share the results, as you can see, is that the almost the majority, 43% here, took the last answer, which is can mix persif all the methods, so row 1H and row 2H, all is applicable together. That is the only most complete and the most correct answer. Why is the other answers not correct? Well, can use either method 1 or 2 or method 3, but only one method per SIF. That would be great if this would be true, but of course, in reality, this is not true. I give you a practical example. Safety PLCs are still today mostly based on Road 1H 6.15.08. Your field sensors, hard and smart transmitters are mainly based today on Road 2H. And clearly, on any project that you have been working in already or that you have been engineering already, you will have to mix those together. You will buy on the market some vendor, let's say, products like hard or smart transmitter, and they may come with a piece of evidence called certificate, which then will prove you that it is done on the road to H. Your safety PLC vendor may have given you already a road to 1H certificate. Like the majority of all certificates that are coming from documentation from GMI on their interfaces will be based on the road 1H, and clearly you are allowed to mix those all together. That is why this answer number 1 is not correct, because it's only one method per SIF. And then the other answer was saying can only use road 1H when claiming prior use. Well, that's totally wrong. Whoever have selected that, that means there is some fundamental misunderstanding of the standard, because prior use has nothing, and I repeat, has nothing to do with road 1H. All right, let me finish this. Let me continue. That's a summary table, which we were explaining in the previous slides. So focus here on the top on the HFT. That stands for hardware fault tolerance. Ask yourself the question as an engineer, how many danger failures can my safety loop tolerate and still achieve my safety function? If I'm telling you HFT 0, that means your system doesn't have to tolerate any danger failure. And HFT 0, that is the one you see here on the right-hand column. In the bottom corner here, you see here minimum required HFT. That is a table 6. That's a table 6 from the IEC 61511. And I already mentioned for SIL 1, any mode of operation, you can actually do this or build this and comply to the standard with a equivalent of a HFT equal to 0. Whereas for a low demand that is less than once per year, you can still do it with an HFT equal to 0, but if you go to high demand continuous mode or for a SIL 3, any mode, that's always required to have an HFT equal to 1. The conditions before you are allowed to claim here a road to H prior use evidence is quality feedback data. And again, I made some slides on that. End user feedback, that means it needs to be the end user's feedback, not from someone else, not from a commercial database. It needs to be your feedback if you are an end user listening into this webinar. And the standard will give you guidance on the report 4, which is coming from the 84 committee. In the meantime, we have a new date on this here. And the Namur 130, but I have the correct dates coming on the coming slides. FVL and LVL stands for the full variable language, limited variable language devices needs to have a diagnostic coverage of minimum or higher than 60%. Reliability data confidence factor needs to be 70%. That means the confidence factor of your failure feedback needs to have a minimum equivalent to 70% or higher. Plus, you need to prove performance evidence in similar operating environments. If you comply to all these conditions, you are totally allowed to use this, let's say, simplified table, which is coming from the 61511. Row to H in the middle. Row to H is coming from the 61508 edition 2. And row to H is now claiming for that proven in use. That's not from the end users, prior users, from the manufacturers that needs to prove that. But you can ask yourself the question, the manufacturers can only receive data from the end users. That means if the end user doesn't have the data in the first place, you can ask yourself the question, how did the manufacturer receive the data? So it needs to be feedback from similar application, similar environment. The data means the failure data, the quality data, the data uncertainties needs to be collected based on 2 international standards, which are referenced over here. And of course, then additionally, most likely the accreditation offices, like you see now today in the market, they will do additional evaluation. They will analyze the amount of feedback. They will put an expert judgment on that. They may do some additional tests to come into some decision on how reliable this device is to use or not. If there is no feedback data, and I'm giving an example, if GMI develops a brand new product from scratch, there is no field records, there is no installation records to come back yet because it's not been installed yet. So enable to start to introduce in the market a new device, the only option that is remaining is the one from 1997 and it's called Road 1H. And Road 1H is based mainly on that hardware section of the IEC 61508. It has been described here in this reference, which is 7442. It's based on an analysis that the engineer will mainly do known as a failure mode and effect analysis. Here is shown the failure mode and effect diagnostic analysis. That means there is some diagnostic also to be considered if there's of course diagnostic in that type of device. That engineer will then also make all the fits, all the failures in time in order to make the equation and estimate what is my ratio of safe failure fraction. In other words, that's the quantity, how many dangerous undetected failures are hidden away in my device. And the lower the percentage of danger undetected failures in that device, potentially, the higher the ratio in percentage will be of the safe failure fraction. As Massimo was already mentioning, GMI on their function safety management also have evidence on all their products on systematic capability. Now, systematic capability is something that cannot be missed on a certificate or on a assessment. When you make an assessment, that means that this report of the assessment or the result of the assessment needs to give you, besides the SIL level, also the systematic capability level. The system that has been analyzed will also be analyzed based on a type A or a type B. Those are 2 different definitions coming from the 61508. And since the year 2010, edition 2 of the SIG 1508, a safety manual is mandatory to be issued. What is not mandatory, and that may be strange for some people in this webinar here, a certificate is not mandatory. I had an interesting question from one of the engineers listening into the webinar today, and I have solved that in the Q&A session later. But a certificate is not a must. A certificate is nothing more than a, call it an instrument between manufacturers competition, enabled to compete with each other. They prove by a piece of paper that their device can be achieving or is suitable for a certain skill level. I can tell you even more, the SIG 1508 and the SIG 1511, if you search a standard, the word certificate does not exist. The word assessment assist, again, I've made an answer, which I will give you then later on when I see the slides. So, summary. If you have done all this analysis and you came up with all these definitions, you will come up with the failure rate, which is a frequency of failures that PFD stands for probability to fail danger upon demand, and PFH stands for probability to fail per hour. Well, that will lead into a safe failure fraction, all the analysis. And if you look in this table, now they ask you for the HFT 0, 1, and 2, it is the amount of safe failure fraction. And the higher the safe failure fraction, the higher the SIL with a lower HFT. The lower the safe failure fraction, the higher the HFT will be to achieve here the same SIL. That is what you see here on this table. That's the minimum table, table 6. I will skip that, as I already have explained. Conditions are to collect data. And I updated this slide. For those who listened to the previous webinar or looking to the recorded session, it was still based before 2023, the release of this new updated NAMUR recommendation. For those who do not know what NAMUR means, I call that an association which is mainly driven by the end users in the chemical industry, chemical and petrochemical industry. And NAMUR is having a whole list of recommendation and also of guidance that you can actually access. Of course, you need to pay a membership and able to access these documents. They are, of course, not free of charge. But there was an updated revision in the NE 130 reference document, which is here July 2023. So it is 1 year newest revision. The other one here is called Report 4. And as you have seen on the slide, it was still mentioning 2015. The correct reference for those should be here 2020. So that's here a typo. I should have updated that, but I clearly forgot this. I updated to July 2023 and I forgot here to type 2020. So that should say like the picture is the front sheet of my document, because I'm also an ISA member, so I also have access to the documents. Actually, both. I purchased that document because if you are a member from ISA, you will probably understand that you can access the documents, but of course you cannot take screenshots or cannot copy anything. So I had to buy this document to have full access under my license to understand what the report was asking. Here they give a guidance for the implementation of the ISA 61511, and that was the reference I was giving you earlier, which was 2018 when they adopted it. And the report 4, that's the TR, standing for technical report, has been out since April 2020. What is here now the issue with prior use, or what is here now the items that you need to focus on? Reliability data that you need to claim or that you need to prove as evidence needs to have an upper bound statistical confidence limit of no less than 70%. The volume of operating experience, there was also a question on volume of operating experience, and I can already mention it here. There is no exact volume being precisely defined. How many hours do you need to prove? So that's also a subjectivity of the standard that should be, hopefully, in the edition 3, will be more precisely being defined. You need to prove increased confidence levels with same evidence and the same demonstration of such performance of the devices in the same operating environments and applications. Diagnostic coverage needs to be more than 60%. That's a giveaway because there is no diagnostic coverage-based device today on the market with less than 60%. So it's always more than 60%. So I wouldn't worry too much about the fourth bullet over here. Consideration of the manufacturer's quality management and configuration management system, that could be more formality and procedures. So again, that is not really the issue. The real issue will be the data quality, the 70% confidence, and of course, how many hours of operating experience do you need to prove? What another topic that I mentioned here as a challenge for most end users is the evidence of adequate identification specification of devices where there is some firmware included. My classical question on training classes, like last week I was doing another training class, is to the end users, and it was mainly end users in the training course. Do you have records of all the firmware controlling your safety loops today? In other words, do you have a record of the firmware of your smart and hard transmitters? And potentially the answer is 99% no, we don't have this. Why do we need such type of a definition or such a, let's say, identification and revision? And I'm asking him the following question. If you take your mobile phone today, what firmware do you run today? And if you do not know the firmware, like I don't, because I don't really care what firmware do I need, I just want to use my telephone the way that I'm used to use it. But if someone is updating the firmware overnight, it's possible that in the morning when you wake up, you take your own telephone again, that maybe due to the new firmware on the old platform called hardware, my functionality is different. Well, that's exactly the same that we are caring about when we're looking at our safety function capabilities on our devices, which are controlled by firmware. I whack in a new firmware, my device safety function may have changed. That was already causing a chemical incident in the world, and that was based on a firmware which was not identical to the same vendor, the same hardware model number, but with an older version of firmware. Those sensors did not agree in voting, and therefore the installation did not trip the way it has been designed. So if you have firmware in your devices, make sure that the identification will also take care of the firmware. Special conditions apply to reduce HFT. We never had to apply this yet, as HFT is mainly HFT 0, because we mainly work today in the world of SIL 2. SIL 3 is rare to find as a majority, of course, in the industry for many reasons. Price, configuration, you need to have more, you need to have redundancy in there, you need to do more proof testing, so the end users are trying to avoid that. So clear that SIL 3 is still a requirement that is defined in the standards, but the use of SIL 3 is starting to fade out. The use of SIL 1 is starting to win. The use of SIL 2 is starting to lose against the battle against the SIL 1. And I know clients that even SIL 3 is forbidden. They tell their engineers, do your magic on numbers and make sure we have no SIL 3 needed as a requirement in our installation. Proven in use is coming back on the 61508. The manufacturers need to collect data. And the question is again, how does the manufacturers do that? Do they get the data back from their installations? Do they know exactly how it was configured? Do they know exactly how it has been proof tested? Do they know the conditions where the sensor or the device has been installed in? And if you believe they know all that, well, then I say, yes, you could maybe start to believe also proven in use from your manufacturers. I doubt, because I'm always a devil. If I'm having a inspection and I'm doing an assessment on a project and we have proven in use, I challenge the vendors to convince me with evidence how they came to the judgment that this device is suitable to be used for the situation and condition and application and environment that I'm actually making my inspection in. Based on field feedback for elements in the use of similar application and environment, and there are 3 conditions, we need also to find evidence that the data has been collected in accordance with those 2 standards, and that's the most difficult condition to prove evidence. They need to prove evaluation on the amount of field feedback. I give an example. I had a vendor, they sold thousands of solenoids and the return was like 4 or 5 solenoids. The question is that reflecting reality? We all know, most likely not. But if their amount of judgment is based on the 4 failures which they have received back, well, that is for me something that I have struggles in my brain to accept that. I'm saying like, that's not really the reality. It may be different. So exercise of expert judgment and where needed, of course, they are undertaking specific tests. So they will start to do additional tests because the evidence being provided is not sufficient or is not adequate enough to make their judgment statement. Reliability data uncertainties, again, needs to be proven, but here we have 90% confidence factor, whereas SIG 5011 had only 70% minimum. That was the coverage must be more than 60%. Again, that's a giveaway and only for simple devices and for simple functionalities. I'm just trying to launch the next poll.
Yes, the second poll of the day.
I'm just trying to find it as per manufacturer. Is that the one? I think, yeah, launch this one. So,
okay.
As per 61508 standard, which is the edition 2, a manufacturer like GMI with a device and system certificate and test report. And now we can answer the following. Can be based either on road 1H or road 2H, but only one road selection per device and or system should be used on that certificate or on the test report. It can be based only on road 1H as per safe failure fraction hardware fault tolerance definition. C, it can be based only on road 2H with failure feedback records. And D, it can be based on either road 1H or road 2H individually or mixed. So you have 4 potential answers here. So when a manufacturer is giving evidence on a piece of paper called certificate that the assessment is based on, what option would they be allowed to choose? Option A, B, C, or D here on this poll question. So we need a few more clicks because we see that the number of attendees has been growing over the last 10 minutes. So there were people arriving late on the scene. As I said, don't worry, this is all recorded. So at your leisure, at your speed, you can replay on the YouTube channel from GMI all this recorded session. Of course, the recording will take a bit of time, but in the next coming days, it should be online on the YouTube channel. All right, let me try to finish this poll and try to share that. I need a few more clicks.
The correct answer?
Yeah, I need a few more clicks. Otherwise, I go and strike. Show me some respect and click on one of the answers. And if I don't reach the minimum number that I need to reach in my mind, there are still a few people that are afraid to click. So pick an answer. You have only 1 out of 4 that is correct. Okay, we are getting there. One more click. Whoever has not clicked, here we go. Thank you. So I end the poll and I share the results. And as you can see, we have here 2 answers, A and D, who both score the same number of people that clicked that. The good news is one of them is correct. The bad news is the other group is totally wrong. And the reason for that is answer A is not correct. So we had 40% clicking on answer A. So if you believe that a vendor can base their analysis either on the road 1H and the road 2H, that is still correct in the statement. But what is wrong here? Only one road selection per device and or system. Unfortunately, I would like to believe that this could be correct, but unfortunately, it's not correct. Because unfortunately, vendors will mix. You see more and more today, especially when you have a device like a smart or a hard transmitter. That means there is firmware in there. I can already tell you a little secret here. If a manufacturer needs to analyze or pay for analysis to check that the software is safe enough, that will cost a lot of time and a lot of money and effort. And what you will see in the market, when they do a new revision of hardware, they make a new FMEDA. They take partially some story from the analysis of road 1H, and then all of a sudden you will see on the certificate it's based on road 2H, but still they will claim a safe failure fraction. I can tell you now, if you have a certificate piece of paper in front of you and you find the safe failure fraction on that piece of paper, and you find also road 2H, well, I can tell you that is a mixed certificate, because safe failure fraction cannot be coming from proven in use. Why do they use and still proven in use? Clearly, because somehow the firmware have been proven over the years to be reliable, and they will actually base their entire analysis on road to H. But for the hardware section, the expert judgment and the additional analysis was based partially on road 1H. That means they mixed those two roads together. Answer B can be based only as per road 1H, as already mentioned. That would be great, but that's of course not always correct, because road 1H is no longer the only option available. The vendors and the manufacturers will likely mix that. That's also why it can only be based on road to H is also not correct, because we mix them. So the only correct answer was here indeed answer D, can be based on either road 1H or road to H individually or mixed. Okay, I stop sharing that and I will click on the next page. If I go to this road 1H, which is the 1997 edition 161508, that is here. The safe value fraction is your deciding factor. Whereas table 6, the SIL column on the left-hand side was your deciding factor. That means if you want to build a SIL 1, you check what your mode of operation is, and that will become your HFT decision. So your design decision is based on the SIL level in the 61511, but on the 61508, it's not the SIL level. Your design decision is based on your safe value fraction, and that's the left column over here. Between experts, we typically joke, we say the safe value fraction is the money-making table for the manufacturers, because the higher the safe value fraction, the higher the SIL level. The higher the SIL level, the more costly the device will be. Also, the more engineering will be in that device, the more architects will be in the device. So there are a lot of reasons why higher SILs will be more complex, will be more, let's say, costly to develop, etc., etc. That also will reflect here in the safe value fraction if it is a single device. If you have, for instance, a standalone SIL3 relay from GMI, why is a SIL3 interposing relay from GMI being approved as a standalone system enabled to go to a SIL3? If you look in the column, the relay is a type A relay. Type A will mean that all the data is known, the failure behavior can be 100% determined, and there is sufficient failure data. And the sufficient failure data in type A used to be, in edition 1 of the 61508, 100,000 hours of field experience with 10 different applications and 1 year service record. That used to be type A. I'm saying used to be because edition 2 has softened that requirement. But the definition of the table remains the same. That means coming back on the safety relay from GMI for SIL3, that is the reason that they are having a safe failure fraction which is just above 90%. If I would take one of the certificates from GMI, I can already show you that certificate. If it is a SIL3 on a device, the safe failure fraction will sit above 90% and below 99%. And possibly Massimo will acknowledge this because he will recognize this on the documentation of the devices. They will have type A, they will have a safe failure fraction of just more than 90%. And that's why GMI can, according to standard, prove that this is based on the 61508 complying to SIL3. It is suitable to be used in a SIL3 domain. Safe failure fraction is 1. Second will be diagnostic coverage, if any, because there are some diagnostic coverage mainly on hard and smart transmitters, mainly on safety PLC microprocessor boards. There will be some diagnostic coverage on that. Like for instance, on a solenoid, on an actuator, on a normal valve, mechanical valve, there is no diagnostic coverage. But there may be potentially some safe failure fraction. That means the FMEA or the FMEDA that has been done on that type of device may come to an estimate how many failures in time and quantification of safe failure fraction do I have on such device may lead into a certain percentage of a safe failure fraction. What Massimo was mentioning earlier in the introduction was they also have systematic capability expression on certificates from GMI. That is the one that is shown over here. And I can give you a small hint. The smallest or lowest number of systematic capability will be suitable for the highest level of SIL. In other words, if you have a SC2 on a device, the maximum SIL that you will be able to achieve, to keep it simple, will be a SIL2. That means if you want to build a SIL3 loop, you need to find devices where SC3 will be defined on that certificate. The safety manual per subsystem or device is mandatory. That means a certificate is not mandatory, but a safety manual is mandatory. The summary as a challenge for you to prove either prior use or proven use. Well, here I make the two columns. On the left-hand side, this was method number 2. That's the proven in use on the SIG 1508. The majority of the manufacturers do not receive feedback. And that's the main struggle we have in the industry. Full stop. Nothing more to say. I already explained most of the reasons why this is. On the right-hand side, the majority of the end users, when they want to claim prior use, well, first of all, start to collect your own feather data. And how good is the quality of your feather data? How do you prove your confidence levels, etc.? And the other challenge, as already mentioned, the majority of our end users do not or never thought about what firmware reference number today is actually controlling their safety functions. Not for the safety PLCs, that's not the target that I'm looking after here. It's mainly for vendors like smart and hard transmitters. Right, coming to an end, trying to summarize and going into the Q&A. And I saw there is another question coming in, but I will hold this for a moment. I first will summarize our webinar. For an end user and an operating company today here in the webinar, start collecting today. Don't wait till tomorrow, because that is already, you are already, to be honest with you, if you are starting to collect it only as of today or as of tomorrow, you are 14 years not complying already to the IEC 61511 edition 2. Because when edition 2 came out, the main message that we tried to broadcast in the industry to the end users, start to collect now. So if you haven't collected now, it's never too late. I would start today, not wait till tomorrow, because you need to have feedback data. And how can you get feedback data if you don't collect it? Of course, the question is, where do we start? How do we collect? Well, the IEC standard, unfortunately, will not give you very good guidance, but I prepared in the Q&A some guidance, again, from Namur 130, that I would recommend to start to read, or read the technical report 4 from the ISA, and hopefully with those two documents, you will have some ideas how to collect, what do I collect, how can I prove it, etc. Redefine your proof test coverage. Because how many of the end users know exactly what proof test coverage mean and how do you prove that? And I give an example. I had an end user last week, was mainly from a refinery, and the refinery had a turnaround of 5 years, which is like one of the standard periods of turnaround. That means in 5 years' time, they will go to a shutdown for 2 months. And in these 2 months, they have to solve 1 million problems. Typically, that's always where the highest pressure of the maintenance, instrument, service engineers will come, because you have to solve all the problems which they found during production, which you were not allowed to solve because the production was not allowed to stop. Now, think about the following simple explanation. You have a pipeline with no product. And during shutdown, you are allowed to move the valve, because then the production people are not getting nervous. How can you prove the functionality of a valve moving when there is no product in the pipeline? It's like pushing your brakes on the parking lot and deciding when you have to do an emergency brake to save your life when there is someone in front of you, you will be able to stop. Well, you know, on a parking, not moving the car, you cannot prove much other than the brake pads are maybe still moving. That's one of the questions. Maybe you can push your car or drive very slow and push your brakes and see you're slowing down. That's then you part your stroke on a valve as an example. That doesn't mean you will be able to do an emergency stop when you need it. Provide valuable feedback to the manufacturers, please. I know it costs money, but question yourself, if you have to buy new equipment, would you rather have to have a manufacturer that can prove thousands of hours in different applications to give you some evidence? Or would you say, well, we do believe the salesperson, he said, it's a very good system, please buy it. And then when using Road to H or Road 1H, evaluate, be critical, become a safety engineer. Do not believe what you read. Ask to prove. Because when I see a document, when I see a certificate, when I see, I be critical in my judgment, and I will ask them questions. Why did this statement on this paper mention me this? What is the reason for that? How do you come to that conclusion? How do you come to that percentage? How do you come to that definition? That is something that I like to be critical on my judgment, on my quality of documentation. Right, we can help you with services as well as in the 6511, as in the 62443 for the IT and the OT security on your IACS, Industrial Automation Control System. We do provide mainly still today the under the license of TFV Rhineland programs. We are supplying functional safety engineer. We are supplying the combined security training courses. And of course, we can also have customized in-house training courses. If you don't have the book, I'm sure that Massimo will support me in saying that you can go to the website of GMI and you can request one of those hard copies of the SIL manual.
Yes, it's possible to download the electronic version from our website or request the paper version via always our website.
Okay, in that latest revision, edition 4, I wrote chapter 7 and 8. Chapter 7 was SIG 1511 and chapter 8 was the security risk assessment. All right, let me quickly swap and I go in.
But before to skip to another presentation, we have a question from our attendee.
Okay, good. I will take it in a minute. Let me
Yes.
open this file over here. So we have predefined questions already coming in from people, but there is a question here coming in. The concept of prior use relies on historical data over time. On the other hand, firm updates, probably firmware updates, have been upgraded more oftenly. Is there a set timeline for how long prior in use can remain unchanged before it qualifies for prior in use status? Shall in use without change before being qualified for prior use? Oof. Okay, I'll try to read this again, and now I'll try to understand. So I think the question is related to firmware updates on devices. And the question is, can we then still claim for prior use even when we have a firmware update on a device? The answer is, in my opinion, no. You cannot maintain your prior use statement on a device when the firmware is different. As I told you, if I'm updating a firmware in a device, that device can start to behave different. On the other hand, even when the firmware has not changed, and I give you a simple example, the maintenance engineers that needs to replace a smart or a hard transmitter, how many settings do you have today on a normal, traditional, let's say modern smart and hard transmitter? The answer is too many. Hundreds of settings. When you replace a broken instrument and replace it with the same vendor, with the same revision of hardware, potentially with the same revision of firmware, will you make sure that all the settings are the same? And if not, for the settings which are not the same, can they have an influence on your safety function? That would be my question if I would do an inspection with an end user claiming prior use, regardless if the firmware has been updated or not. So if the firmware is different, the first statement that we will make is make sure that all the firmware from all the devices which are the same brand with the same hardware revision are the same. Do not allow different firmware sitting in your installation because potentially there is a influence on your safety function and we want to exclude that. That's also part of our security risk assessment. Okay, let me go into the 3 questions.
Thank you.
Have always been questioned that the SIL approval is not by TÜV or EXIDA, question mark. Is it correct? Any person or organization having the competency certified person is able to certify a product having a certain level of SIL rating. I can say when I read the question, I smiled. And I hope the person that asked the question is here in the webinar, because I'm glad that someone is asking the question, so that I have the opportunity to give you some answer for that. So let me first go into the answer, and then I will explain a bit more. First of all, as I mentioned in the webinar, a product on his own can never be certified. That's a misconception from sell people. Sell people say, oh, we sell you a SIL certified relay. This is not correct. because a relay cannot be certified. A relay can be assessed, and the assessment results can be summarized on a piece of paper, and I can put a title on a piece of paper called certificate. That means a certificate makes a statement that an assessment was not. And then your question, can only a certified person do that? No, anyone can do it. But the person needs to be competent. There I give you 100%, let's say, right, or I agree 100%. The person make a statement, hopefully will be competent in the statement that he is making towards the reference he is making. In other words, if the reference is towards the IEC 61508, mate, that the device is suitable, is compliant to be used into a certain SIL environment. And if you look into your certificates and if you look into your documentation that you may refer to, you never see the statement from that accreditation body saying this product is certified. They say, no, this product is suitable. You can use a SIL3 relay in a SIL3 suitable domain of a loop. However, if you buy the relay from GMI and you don't put a wire to it, you don't power it up, it has no safety function. It only comes alive when it sits into a safety functionality. So I can certify the behavior of the complete loop. That I can do. But I cannot certify the standalone relay as it has no safety functionality meaning, other than it has been designed to be used as suitable for a SIL. That's the first bullet. The second, as already mentioned in the webinar, the IEC standards, the word certification or certified does not exist. That's a marketing between vendors, period. I'm coming back to the 61508 because I read between the lines in your question, any person, any organization. Well, I give you the requirements for the assessment on the 61508. The IEC 61508 today, edition 2, requires the same as edition 1. An independent, competent person is required for a SIL1 assessment. An independent department, so it can be still from the same company, is required for a SIL2. So in other words, if GMI would like to issue a certificate SIL2, and they go to another department than a development department to make a judgment that the development has done a good job, while the other department can state and make a statement inside from GMI that the device is suitable to be used for a SIL2. But I'm pretty sure the competition of GMI would say, well, you know, GMI is telling from themselves they are good to use, but we don't do that. We go to an external company. And if you read bullet number 3, there is only a requirement for SIL3 to go to an independent organization. That means now GMI cannot do a SIL3 certification. That is why you saw the 15 different logos that Massimo was showing on certification. They use Exceeders, they use different TOVs. That's all required as an independent accreditation organization to GMI to say you can do it for SIL3. But as they are with those organizations, they ask the same organization to also make a statement for SIL2. And I do not know if GMI has something for SIL1, but they potentially would also do it for SIL1. So they always use a third party for regardless the SIL level. The IEC standard only requires an independent party, independent organization for SIL3, not for SIL3 and SIL1. And that independency is required to make an expert judgment assessment statement against the normative section of the standard, which will be clearly an assessment against the 61508. It's always against part 1, 2, 3, and they always list also part 4, which are the 4 normative sections of the standard. The statement is typically stating that the product is suitable to be used in compliance to a SIL level with a systematic capability number. I'm interested in your definition of the two terms and how to define the volume of operating hours required. I can sense when I'm reading this question that this engineer has some experience because he knows already what the problem is of volume is not defined in our standard. And that's also what I have to confirm, unfortunately. I cannot change the standard definition. So both standard 61508 and 61511 do not define the exact number of hours of volume for operating required. So that is the subjectivity. However, as I showed you here a picture, and I took the picture here or took a screenshot from the NE130. Of course, that's a copyright product, so I need to be careful, but I mentioned here copyright from Namur. That's the July 2023 release. Here, they build up two cases. Of course, I did not explain the cases here in depth, and I will not do it also because I'm already way over time. But we have case one and case two. And basically, what they say here, if you use a device from a manufacturer that has no SIG 1508 background, then they go into the basic requirements from the NE 95 as being an end user. You need to prove your safety function has been tested. That's your testing period over here. That's the proof of safety qualification. The proof of qualification for a safety instrumented system, that is your testing that you have to do. And then the prior use declaration have two different approaches. They shorten here from 1 year with 10 devices to a half a year with 10 devices. For the very simple reason they shorten here a half a year, because they use devices according to the SIG 1508 in the development manufacturer. Here it was without the SIG 1508. And then they use the NE93, which is the company-specific fault statistics, enabled to claim data. That means enabled to claim operating experience. That is what they will use to verify the prior use status. That's one approach. If you go to the technical report 4 from the ISA 84, they will give you a different approach. And last but not least, that's the last question, Memory. Can you declare, for example, that the SIV meets criteria for SIL 2 if the road to H prior use was selected for some devices within that safety function? Well, if I read the question now, and I read the question also when I prepared the answer, I understood the question different then than I understand now. For instance, if you have a loop with 10 devices and 5 of them are claimed on prior use, you cannot say the rest of the loop will be based on prior use. It's for every single subsystem individually. That means still go back to the practical recommendation and guidance of those two documents which we referred to before. Right, we have one last poll before we can finalize this webinar,
Yes.
and I go back
a quality poll for us to understand if you like our webinars. We asked our attendees to express an opinion on our today presentation, and this will give us a reason to continually improve and provide you with quality content.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm always joking when I see this
Yes,
poll.
it's not joking.
My salary is not depending on this poll, so I am lucky. Otherwise, I should ask for a raise because I never got a poor or not what I expected, has not been received in these hundreds of webinars we have been doing. So listen, when you send your questions in, we only can assume what you try to really ask. It's different when we meet in real person. But again, with the coverage of a webinar, and again, thank you to GMI to sponsor this, because they are sponsoring me and able to provide my time for that. We are trying to reach as much as possible different engineers worldwide, and we are always trying to take a topic which is not say sensitive, but which we know is a challenge in reality. Okay, so we hope with what we provided here, free of charge for you, not free of charge for GMI, because you still have to pay my check, is sufficiently of use for you. And thank you again for everything, and thank you for listening to the webinar.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay,
Okay,
we can
thank you,
close.
Massimo. I think I can close the poll and I can share.
Perfect. Our concepts. Okay, thank you very much. And we can go to our content, Tino. The last slide.
Okay.
Okay, our contacts are still on the slide. Thank you, Tino, for your presentation. Always very effective and full of valuable content.
Thank you.
I want to remind everyone that on our YouTube channel, you can rewatch all our webinars, while on our website, you can find out about the program of the future one. Thank you again, and see you soon. Stay safe.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Massimo. Thank you. Ciao, everyone. Thank you.
Ciao, ciao, ciao.